So forgive me, I'm using my cell phone propped up against my laptop instead of my webcam for my audio and visual recording, just because the quality is so much superior. I'm going to be covering this topic. I actually wrote some things down again, so again, forgive me if my eyes are tracking or I'm kind of looking away a bit. So, first and foremost, I'm a Canadian, right? I'm a proud one. And I must say, if I had to draw from a pack of cards, one card designated to each country in this world, and pick one at random to be my country's neighbor, I would be so damn happy if I drew the United States of America. So, what do I mean with my video title? Well, to be fair, it may be more suited to title it Nova Scotia's Napoleon Complex, or the Halifax Regional Municipalities Napoleon Complex, or my personal limited life experiences, exposure, perception of a Napoleon complex. I lived in Alberta for years. Again, it was Calgary, particular part, but I didn't get or notice the same sort of rhetoric. But I do have a feeling, which may certainly not be indicative of the sort of discourse or conversation I'd hear everywhere, and I don't know if it's just in my province or in the Maritime or Atlantic provinces or the whole country, but what I mean with my title is that I've observed and heard so much rhetoric, so much commentary, and general criticism of America and Americans that kind of grosses me out a bit. Look, I get it. Third highest population planet on Earth, right? As flawed as its media is, it is by far the most free of the most populated countries and has by far the highest ability for independent press to freely film and distribute content that it wants to provide. America is an easy target. It's not hard to find a handful of people at their worst and film it. I get it. The country has a lot of problems, right? But what the hell's up with Canada? Is Canada a shining beacon of all that is right, bogged down by its abhorrent neighbor? No. And yes, I am being hyperbolic. Is Canada a huge landmass with natural resources, but an insufficient military to safeguard it, fully dependent on its neighbors' protection for survival? No. And yes, I am being a bit hyperbolic again. I would argue, though, that the latter might be closer to the truth, or they're equally far from the truth. But despite that hyperbole, the type of, at times, borderline vitriolic commentary that I hear where I live about Americans, yes, those 330 million people that live in one of the largest and most diverse sovereign land masses on this planet, America, is awful. The wide generalizations that I hear, I don't get it. Okay, so during the Trump and Clinton election, New York and California are blue states, right? Democratic. Clinton. Where do American celebrities come from? Well, some of them come from all over the country. Where do they go? California. Hell, a lot that come from New York go to California. A lot are born in California. Business, media, New York, California, New York, California, New York, California, New York, California. Notice a trend in the states I'm listing. Blue, New York, blue, California, Democratic, celebrities, media, financial giants, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, New York Stock Exchange, LaGuardia. That's in New York, right? I apologize if I'm fucking that up. LAX. Okay. So where do American celebrities come from? Where does American mainstream media come from? Where are the loudest voices of the country coming from to external ears? New York and California. That's a fact. The impression I gathered from hearing people who live near me was that Trump had a few supporters represented by unsavory stereotypes of a rural Deep South citizen, and that Clinton obviously had the election in the bag. And hey, most of the celebrities were leaning that way, and most of the media was. So obviously it's going to be a landslide, right? No. Dear Canadians who are ignorant about America's geography, and I'm going to get into geography too. Believe it or not, the USA isn't New York and California with open ocean between them. The USA is a big country with a lot of people. Gauging the sentiment of the nation's people by elites and media who live in two echo chamber situations in two states, contrasted by stereotypical imagery of some Trump supporters in rural towns that you've never heard of, isn't a very thorough image of American political ideology as a whole, or the citizens that compose it. So what? Kansas doesn't exist, Nebraska doesn't exist, Idaho doesn't exist, Indiana doesn't exist, Alabama, Alaska, Georgia, Kentucky, South Carolina, Wyoming, Texas, Utah, Tennessee, South Dakota, Oklahoma. None of those states exist. They're all red. They've all been red, predominantly or entirely, for well over a decade. You get my point. If someone has such an ignorant impression of the American public, why would they think they know enough about them to speak in harsh, condescending, broad strokes about them, even vilifying them? So, back to geography. I hear this all the time. Americans are ignorant, right? Laugh out loud. Americans think we all live in igloos. Haha, idiots. Did you see that guy from the States who thinks all Canadians live in igloos? Canada has a tenth of the US population. Give me a week, or wait, no, 5 damn seconds or minutes, and I'll find you an ignorant Canadian. Matter of fact, I'm an ignorant Canadian. Quiz me. Let's pick a country at random, right? Senegal. I know it's in West Africa. I think some of it borders an ocean. I think its citizens are called Senegalese. I think its capital city is Dakar. I speculate it's a majority black population based on geography. I bet that it is a hot climate with a warm winter and a hot ass summer based on geography. I'm guessing that the majority religion is Islam based on my slivers of knowledge about the region. And lastly, my historical knowledge is down to they were probably occupied by France. French colonialism is probably instilled in them in some way, shape, or form still or previously. And they probably have a Portuguese linked history, if not only or largely including the Atlantic slave trade. So that's all, and I'm guessing a lot of that. I am ignorant as hell about the country of Senegal. Despite my sheer ignorance, though, I feel confident that if I asked many of the people who criticize American ignorance about Canada, they would not be able to tell me more about Senegal. Sorry, they would not be able to tell me more about Senegal than what I just told you if I asked them. So, what's so special about Canada that would require Americans to be knowledgeable about it? As far as the stereotypes are concerned, I get it, right? It's one thing to be ignorant about Senegal, but I don't believe that people in Senegal live in this or live in that or do this or do that. That's incorrect. I feel like that's Canadians magnifying something or taking what's quizzed about people in America and taking it out of proportion. So if I walked around with a camera for a day in a Canadian city and I quizzed 200 people and I asked them, what do you think the average Canadian lives in? Or sorry, what do you think the average Senegalese live in? I could ask them, I could ask without them, with cutting me asking and only giving the answers. I could film these people and say, do you think the average Senegal citizen lives in a mud hut? Do you think they live just in the jungle? Do you think they live in a high-rise condo? Do you think they live in a slum or shantytown? Do you think they live in a Soviet-style row house building? I could ask any of those questions and film the answers. And I'm going to get a lot of incorrect answers, I'm sure, including by myself. I don't know the answers. And I probably didn't include the most common living condition in my list I just gave. My point is that it's easy to arouse an ignorant answer out of someone if you make them answer a question or ask them to answer a question that they don't know the answer to. So, again, I circle back. What's so special about Canada that would require Americans to be knowledgeable about it? Let's pick another country, right? Denmark. Now tell me, if you went to Denmark and quizzed 10,000 different people, and you quizzed them on American cities, and quizzed them on Canadian cities, American history, Canadian history, American culture, Canadian culture, which country do you think they would score higher on their knowledge about? Really? I would strongly bet that they would score higher on the American quiz almost across the board. So why wouldn't Canadians know more about the US than Americans know about Canada? Danish citizens. I think that's what people in Denmark are considered, right? Danish? Sorry if I'm wrong. I'm an ignorant Canadian. If Danish citizens lean towards American knowledge over Canadian, why would Americans know as much about Canadians than vice versa? Doesn't make any sense. It does, however, make sense that a Danish person would know more about America than they would about Canada. So, what, is the Vancouver film scene as big as Hollywood or something? Do you think the Canadian dollar is the global reserve currency now? No, the USD is. Everything is pegged to the US dollar in some way, form, or fashion. Everything. Even if you're sanctioned by NATO or sanctioned by the US, everything is in some way, shape, or form, trickle down effect, as far down the line as it may be, is pegged to the US dollar. The US is our ally. The US is currently virtually immune to a wide-scale military land invasion and homeland traditional warfare. While Canada may not be particularly a poke the hornet's nest kind of country, and either way, it has the US as an ally, and if Canada were to be attacked, we can rest assured that we have a, let's say, very helpful neighbor to the south, as an understatement, or deterrent to attack us in the first place, more importantly. A big brother or a big sister or a big sibling or family member, if you will. Yeah, we'll have our sibling quarrels, but we're family. And what if Canada didn't have the US as a neighbor? What if we had a hostile neighbor, especially a global superpower neighbor that wasn't friendly? What if North America had been constructed different? What if Greenland was a well-populated hostile nation to Canada and it directly landmass bordered us? I know, that's a lot of whataboutism. It's not reality, it doesn't matter or apply. But my point is that we shouldn't take for granted some of the benefits of our close relationship with and proximity to the USA, just because we don't need to benefit from some aspects of it currently. So is it a Napoleon complex? What is it? Jealous that everyone talks about the USA? Salty that you hear about and talk about the USA more than people in the USA hear about or talk about Canada? Is it feeling a need to prove something? Show your big sibling that you're a grown-up too. Show the big, tough, popular person, the pretty person with a following, that you're cool too. My address to fellow Canadians: be thankful for the neighbor we have. And if you had to flip a sided coin to determine where you had to live for the rest of your life, I can safely assume that I feel for the majority of the people, the USA would be very high on their list of potential destinations. So, let's touch on COVID briefly. Has the American response to COVID been flawed? Well, like everywhere else in the world, yes. It's a serious issue, but a complicated, multifaceted one. Just criticism is very valid and can be helpful. But if you look at the rhetoric, America is the worst off in the world, which is true in terms sheerly of reported cases, yes, but accounting for unreported cases, unknown. Accounting for countries fudging numbers, unknown. Cases per capita, well, we know America doesn't lead in cases per capita. And I'm not talking about countries or technically sovereign states that have wild numbers of percentages based on a very tiny population. I'm talking Latin America, right? Chile, Peru, Brazil, countries, some of which, or at least one of which still, is comparable to Canada's population. In the case of Brazil, it's quite a bit higher. The other, Chile and Peru, are comparable, if not slightly smaller than, well, a bit smaller, but smaller than Canada's population, but they're not tiny, tiny countries. In any case, my point is testing per capita lower, cases per capita higher. In Canada, too, we have a pretty damn large landmass for our incredibly small population density. It's a lot of separation. A lot of government decisions and civilian decisions made more wisely than some places too. But, okay. So, and yes, the US is catching up to the highest per capita case country. Trust me, I get that. And I know that there's other issues at play contributing to that, like California pre and post rioting or protesting. It's complicated, right? I get it. Or I'm trying to get it. Okay, so we need to factor in the amount of testing. I hear, again, rhetoric and video content most easily digestible and readily available. That would lead you to believe that the US is barely testing people, but that's simply not true. We have far more testing per capita than the majority of countries, and the measures taken by some countries to contain the virus and test its people are measures that would be heavily unpopular, if not virtually impossible, to implement in the USA, or Canada for that matter. Never mind the economic structure and stature differences. Regardless, the USA far exceeds Canada for percentage of the population that have been tested. I guess my sticking points here are Canadians criticizing Americans for knowing less about Canada than vice versa. Doesn't make any sense to me. On average, any given person on this planet would know more about the USA than Canada. So why wouldn't The average Canadian know more about the USA than the average American would know about Canadians. Canadians taking granted for their neighbor, then yes, I am highly generalizing the country, and this might not even be prevalent outside of the bubble that I live in. And that's not a COVID term. I mean the bubble that I live in. I mean the city I live in, the neighborhood I live in, the place I work, the province I live in, the life experience and people I've encountered within that location, within those sub-regions, within that job environment. I'm biased and I have a biased viewpoint, right? Canadians who judge Americans based on the actions of a statistical few, while being quite ignorant in their own right, fueled by biased media and celebrity consumption. I don't know if the Canadians I hear are just greater than thou, my shit doesn't stink, we are supreme and everyone else feeling, and above everyone else feeling individuals, or if it's just jealousy or saltiness that our brother or sister state is more globally influential than us. Either way, it puts more of a black eye on the speaker and their constitution attribution to the country that I live in for me than the one being attacked. Much of the time, when I hear condescending discussion about Americans, the US, or their president. And this video isn't to praise or worship Americans, to praise or worship the country, to praise or worship their leader, surely not their leader. But that's a whole other subject, and I also feel differently than many people I hear about that subject. And I'm not here to praise or worship the nation as a whole, culture, everything. That said, yes, all those things I listed do warrant criticisms, but I'm quite turned off by some of the discourse and rhetoric I hear from fellow Canadians. Anyway, if anyone actually takes the time to ever watch this someday, I'd love to know your opinions. This is just mine, and it's not set in stone. If you feel very poorly about Americans and are Canadian, please let me know why in the comment section. Preferably more mature and responsible. Preferably be mature and reasonable, and I'll take it in kind. I don't want to start a war in the comments, but I do want opinion exchange, and ideally people to feel comfortable saying anything that they think, knowing that someone can respond by saying anything they think, and then think when you read each other's message. It's that simple. Or is it? It should be that simple, right? I don't want to start a war in the comments, but I want opinion exchange. I want openness to listen and discuss, create dialogue. Maybe I'm wrong on every observation I made. Tell me why. Really do, please. And if you only know how to tell me your feelings by calling me, if you're Canadian, you call me a traitor. If you're American, you call me a dumbass. If you tell me to kill myself, if you say crazy stuff in the comment section, go ahead. If your comment still has some derivable quality to it, I'm thankful. Ideally, it'll be more mature and constructively phrased, but look, I'll take anything. And if I think it's an abhorrent viewpoint, I'm glad to get the feedback. I don't want it to be a biased perspective, and I won't think, oh, all of these people think this or all of those people think that because of a few comments that are wild or inflammatory. But I just want comments. Maybe I'm wrong in every observation I made. Tell me why. I want to know more. I want to refine. Maybe one of you can learn more or refine from my perspective or a perspective from someone else in the comments. Thank you.